Now that we've covered code blocks, we're ready for a really, really important concept in programming, and that's scope. So, what is scope exactly? Scope in programming refers to the region of code where a variable is visible and can be used. Variables only exist in the block where they are declared. This block is the extent of their scope. A block could be a conditional, a loop, method, etc. Again, things we'll be covering in some future lessons. Once you're outside that block, that variable is out of scope and no longer accessible. Well, we do have access to some scope, right? We've covered that now that we've written out these switch statements, if else, branching trees. They all use a curly brace, so they all create blocks of code. Well, it turns out when you declare variables inside those blocks, you can't use them outside the block. So let's talk about the levels of scope. So we've been focusing on local scope, right? So I'll pull out my IntelliJ, for example, and say I have an if statement. So I'm going to get rid of some of this extra stuff. And notice I'm going to get an error right now. So I have my if statement, and I declared x is equal to 10. So I'm going to do a print statement, and I'm going to say x is equal to, and then I'm going to put the value of x with some concatenation. Oh no, I got an error. Did I do something wrong? It says, cannot resolve symbol x. Bring int x into scope. X only exists inside the if block. Trying to call x outside of this block is going to cause problems. This is actually undefined. If I try to run it, cannot find symbol, cannot find variable x, yada, yada, yada. Even if I did something like, we'll keep it simple with this example. But yeah, just notice because I declared it here, the x is only accessible to statements inside of the if statement. So let's say I do println, same message. I'm actually gonna get it there. I no longer get an error. Um, this was the old print. So it says x is equal to 10. This was the old print. So yeah, if I make a reference to x inside the if block, they're in the same scope. I declared it inside the if, and so that means any statements also inside the if have access to x. Any statements outside the if block do not have access to x. And this goes for other levels of scope. We're going to learn about method scope and class scope later on. But remember, if you want to identify the scope of anything, just go off by the curly braces. So for example, all the variables in between these two curly braces, I can't use them in other classes because they only belong to the main class. Any variables I declare in this main method, I won't be able to use in other methods because they only belong to this particular method. So yeah, curly braces indicate code blocks. Code blocks, they're kind of the confines, the boundaries. They're as far as your variable goes. Depending on which block it was declared in, that's where your variable will be accessible to. Now, let's say I did declare x, right, outside the if block. Say right before the if block, I put int x is equal to 10. Does this mean that this does not have access to the x now because this statement is in a different block? Well, let's run it. It runs just fine because this if statement knows the indentation of the if. It's on the same block as the declaration here. So I can actually access x just fine inside the if statement. It's only the other way around. This is bad. Let me bring it back. This is bad because x was declared in a more inner scope, a more nested scope. So the scopes, outside of that one won't work. But when I declare above that scope, then the more inner scope does have access to it because overall the if and this variable are actually on the same scope. Check out that indentation. Let's look at an example. So yeah, if true, so this is always going to evaluate to true. So int score equal to 100, print score. If I try to print score outside of the if statement, it's going to fail. Why? Because I declared score inside the if statement. Trying to use it outside the if, outside the block where I declared it, it's not going to work. I can't go outwards, right? But I can go inwards. Again, with our example here in IntelliJ, I can go inwards, right? Because the if statement and the variable declaration, same block, same indentation. So yeah, that's scope. It's a common mistake a lot of early programmers do, but it's also a mistake even experienced programmers can perform, especially when the code gets really complicated, when you're writing like a lot of methods. It's a mistake that happens all the time. So yeah, if you see a variable that you swore you declared and it's giving you an error, it's like symbol not found, not declared. Well, it's because maybe it's out of your scope. So something to remember when you're running into those pesky errors. But that's it for this lesson. Please check out the next videos for some instructions on the lab and the assignments for this week.